Hey, everybody, blessings and welcome to another episode of Black Mental Health Matters. Our mission here is to encourage open dialogue around mental health among Black communities, and we truly appreciate you for being tuned in with us. I am your host, Stephanie Jones. I'm the founder and CEO of SELA Mindset Counseling Collective. I'm a therapist and mindfulness life coach. Listen, today we have the great opportunity to speak to two guests, Itiyopiya Ewart and Otoa Anthony, as we discuss the topic, the impact of systemic inequalities on mental health, a critical examination. We will be back for this panel discussion in just a moment. Hey, everybody, we are back and we're about to jump into our panel discussion. I'm going to bring our panelists up. This is Itiyopiya and Otoa. So unfortunately, Otoa's camera is not working, but we can see his face and we can hear his voice. So we'll still allow him to be a part of this lively conversation. Thank you both for joining us today on this special episode. I'm going to let you both introduce yourselves and tell us where you're from and what you do, and then we'll get into a couple questions. Okay, Itiyopiya, I'll let you go first, please.
Hi, Steph. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited about the discussion. My name is Itiyopiya. I am an embodied mental wellness practitioner. And what that means is I support people in getting better, like as far as holding their pain, transforming their pain. And I have, I like to work with racial trauma. And I'm also a parenting coach and work with families who are looking to connect deeper and better with their children.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, Otua.
Okay, thank you so much, Steph Jones, for this opportunity. I'm also very delighted to join the discussion on this very candid topic. I am Otoa Anthony. I'm coming all the way from East Africa, Kenya, Nairobi, and I represent a whole constituency of what I can term as the true African identity. I am a teacher spanning over 15 years. I'm a mentor, a psychosocial support, um, uh, a youth activator. I believe in the power of tapping the energy of the youth into a transformative journey. I'm a parent, a very proud father of one daughter who is very energetic, and I see an embodiment of myself in her. I'm just an ambassador of the world. I think my happiness rests well when I see the whole world working in favor of humanity.
Absolutely. I love that. And thank you both for sharing. You both have given a great, overview of what you do. And you have similar passions, both parents, and both want to see people well and whole, right? And so if we're getting kind of into the topic, we know that systemic inequalities, like inequalities that go so deep, it's not just like a couple years old, it's just like ingrained in the system. Those things really contribute to poor mental health, right? For me, I've gotten away from saying mental illness because I think sometimes it keeps, us trapped in a bubble. So we could say poor mental health issues. There's just different ways to kind of flow with that. And so it's like both of you have really committed yourselves, and it's your life's mission to the wellness and the wholeness of people, which I think is beautiful. All right. So we're talking about how systemic inequalities affect mental health. And so I wanted to just kind of open up, the topic with what does that look like for systemic inequalities? What does it look like from a historical lens? And I love that this is an international show where we're not just in America, we're in many different continents. And so systemic inequalities look different wherever you are. So I would love for you both to share kind of some of that historical lens from where you are and from what you've seen, please. Ethiopia, you can go first, please. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm here in the United States, and I'm born and raised in the United States. One of the things that I think is really important to highlight, mental health in the United States, even as it was being developed, well, it didn't start here in the United States, but as it was being developed, Black folks weren't even considered in the scheme of things. Black people historically have been seen as being intellectually inferior, being emotionally inferior, and not even quite human historically. And so I think that, like, really paying attention to that framework of how it has begun, or how mental health began, and where we are now, it's like it's so interwoven on why there is disparity in mental wellness right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right, from that historical lens, where in the fabric of America, Black people weren't even considered, we were still considered property, right? And so looking at that, and now we're trying to integrate into society, it is difficult because we're trying to squeeze ourselves into something that wasn't created for us. So I love that. Otoa, can you share from where you are on the globe?
Yeah, I love the sentiments that Ethiopia has just opened the floor. She has opened a real Pandora's box. If you did ask my honest opinion, it is very true that historically some of us on the global stage have come a long way. I speak of the African continental origin, and you are looking at issues such as apartheid. You are looking at issues such as the colonial master.
Yes.
Yeah, most of the African states were under different colonies, and when they came, the thinking or the very strong assertion was a white superiority and a black inferiority complexity. And that has perpetuated the narrative all the way up to the current timings. You look at even the schools, and I speak this passionately because I'm a teacher, I'm a mentor, and when you create artificial disparities based on some of these historical injustices, to me, I call them injustices because they ought not to exist. The fact that schools were demarcated clearly as black schools and white schools. You get to the gate of an institution and a banner reads whites only. It has a long-term consequence to what we are discussing now, because from the very beginning, people feel segregated, people feel left out. And so to me, even the question of colonialism, what did the colonial master do to most of the countries where he or she set a boundary. It was a matter of creating inequality based on the social aspect, the economic aspect, and even depriving the cultural identity of the people of that particular region. And so, to me, historically, we are looking at a society, because when you look at these inequalities vis-a-vis mental, and I like it that you want us to refer to it as poor mental issues. That's a very good euphemism of the same. But it spills down to one thing. Where did the rain start beating us? When we started creating a society that has got what I can call as social stratification. Yeah, the question of identity, the question of second-class citizens, and so people live to that. And when they started coping with that and coming to self-awareness, they realized that there's something terribly wrong here. And as some maybe try to navigate that reality in a sober way, that I can say, to me, I believe in a mantra called grit. Greatness requires internal toughness. So some of them walked to the reality and said, wow, this is here with us. How do we go around it? But to so many others, it was a complete shocker. It was a setback. And it started to be the genesis of what we are discussing now. This has happened like 400 years down the line. Some countries in Africa will be talking of 60 years down the line after attaining their colonial emancipation. But you will still see a lot of these historical injustices that were set upon them. Right now, I can just give you a practical example. Most of the colonial masters are going back to their territorial colonies to say, hey, men and women of these great countries, we are sorry for what we did 60 years, 50 years, 40 years down the line. But the question is, can they address the question of the damage that has already been caused?
Oh, man, you said so much. And so I'm going to share something really quick. And then Ethiopia, if you want to respond to anything that's been said, I definitely want to allow that too. I've seen that happen. And I was just thinking of, some of the West Indian colonies, or countries that have been colonized by the French, and the British. These countries are apologizing, but then it's like, okay, what does that apology do? Oh, I'm sorry. But then what? Because how do you pay for making someone feel inferior? How do you pay for stripping someone of culture or of just surviving on their own, and you've influenced so much of the country. I think if the country removes themselves from like a colonized country, you still lose a part of your identity, because if you've been colonized by, let's say, the British, that has become who you are. You are that. You live in your country, yes, but you have certain things from Great Britain. If they remove themselves, you're still at a loss. There's still a big detriment. So I think to look at that and to see that structure and how it's built, there's loss all around. And I think when we're in that grieving process, not from someone passing away, but from a life that we know shifting and moving, it causes such poor mental health issues, and you end up not being okay and not even recognizing what's going on. I love what you mentioned, Otoa. I thank you for that insight. I kind of am like, oh, do you have a class? I want to sit in. I'm like, well, I want to sit in a class of yours. I'm serious. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, before Ethiopia swings in, we are very pragmatic. We
Yeah.
call a spade, but not a garden tool. For us to address the challenges that we are talking about, we must be very, very candid to say, hey, man, look at what has happened.
Yes.
I'm talking from a practical example, because the King and the Queen of England left Kenya yesterday. And the main mission why he came over, to apologize to the atrocities that the Britons did to this part of the country.
Sure. Great. And how did that feel?
Sorry, is that question directed to me or
Yeah.
Ethiopia?
How did it feel to hear them apologize? Was
mixed reactions. Mixed reactions. If you asked my honest opinion, because one, look at the question of time. If you want to come to and apologize for what you have done wrong to me, the question of time is very important.
Yeah.
You don't wait for 60, I'm hoping 60 years to come and tell me that what I did was wrong. You get it?
Yeah.
Number two, the fact that a lot of damage was caused. People were killed. People went into mental anguish. People lost property. And now a social injustice were created. And now you're coming 60 years down the line to say the colonial government is terribly sorry for what they did. And you see what? These guys, or in as much as we don't want to, we just want to be very fair and look at the issues and not mention names and countries. They have realized that part of addressing the question of mental challenge or issues is coming to the reality and addressing where it emanated from.
Yes.
So most of the African countries are saying, you know what? We need to seek reparation, a reparation. We need to seek for our justice. We need to go to wherever we can get we can get closure to this. And part of the closure is getting compensation for the atrocities that were committed. So they saw this coming, and because they want to act smart enough, they are traversing all over. The colony of Belgium or Germany was in Tanzania the other day. The king and the queen were in Kenya. The Portuguese will come to the colonial territory. The different colonial masters will be traversing the African continent. But the question is, how do we undo? How do we address? Because we are looking at the generations that really suffered a lot when the advent of colonialism came about. And colonialism, I can tell you, my sisters, is the genesis of the problems that we have in this part of the world.
Yes,
when you talk of the global north and the global south, part of the genesis is this one. When you talk of the developed vis-a-vis the developing nations, part of the problem lies squarely in this. When you talk of an African child living in a ghetto, part of the problem emanates from colonialism.
Absolutely.
So squarely, people must come up and say, we are taking full responsibility. Let me allow my sister Itiyopiya to weigh on this.
To respond, Itiyopiya, and then we're gonna flow. It flows right into kind of what we were already talking about. How is it looking for today?
Yeah, like, I mean, everything that has been shared is so valid. And, you know, even what Otoa is saying, part of the problem, I'm like, that's the exact reason. Like colonialism, but the brutality of colonialism, physically and mentally and spiritually, you know, that disconnect that, like, it's different for the United States in that Black folks that were not already living here, because that's a whole nother situation of what was going on in the United States, what is now known as the United States, because there were people who were First Nation people that were considered Black, and that's a whole nother topic. But the Black folks that were brought here were brought into a colonial system. And so, like, it's a different kind of way, where it wasn't that every Black person that was here was from here, which what is the case for people in other parts of the world where colonial powers came and laid down structures of harm and indignity. But yeah, we all suffer from that. Everyone, and I mean, regardless of race, everyone. That structure is so pervasive globally, and that structure set up, like a superiority for some folks and an inferiority for some folks. And what I when people talk about the resilience of Black people and the fact of like how we've continued to persevere and press against colonial systems, I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing to acknowledge. But really, yeah, like calling it out that it is the colonial system that is the problem. And yes, what do we do after being colonized for so long? Even as we talk about decolonization of so many things, including mental wellness, what does that look like when everything is so permeated with that colonial force? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a very valuable thing to discuss, and acknowledging that it's global. It's a global thing. It might have presented itself differently for different places, but underlying it is the same exact system that we see. We have ghettos over in the United States, and who populates the ghettos, right? And that colonial power, the imperialist power, found its value in saying, I am better than you are inferior to me, and this is how you deserve to be treated. How much of that do we continue to hold as people of as Black people? How does that present in our mental wellness?
Yeah. And I think even mentioning that, right? So we're seeing impoverished cities and towns, I mean, really full of people of Black descent. I mean, it's just a reality, it's not something that we can just ignore. It's right there. And we're
Steph,
seeing that stems from what happened, how we were brought over here. And then, okay, once people were freed and once, certain things were released and emancipation and all this, not provided the right resources to even make a good living for ourselves, right? Land, and we're talking about 40 acres and a mule and all that, what does that look like?
well, the other part, I just, if I can speak really quickly on
Yes, you
this, is
can.
that if someone comes to me and apologizes to me about doing something to me, causing me harm, but they continue to perpetuate the harm, is that an apology? And just really considering that. All right, so the British royal family has come to Kenya and said, hey, we're sorry. Now what? And when we talk about reparations, that's the key point. It's like, that's what is reparative. It's not just you come in to say you're sorry and you still have the system set up and you still benefit from the system that is causing me harm. It's not enough to say you're sorry, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. I mean, so true. I was
I'm
to
smiling all. I'm smiling all the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to a woman, it was like a Zoom, and she mentioned that in America it's interesting because we had to live with our oppressors. So in the African colonies or in the African countries, right, who were colonized, let's say they were colonized by the British, but then the British were able to go back to Great Britain, but we had to stay here with those who oppressed us and live amongst them and be in society and always be in constant contact. And so when we're talking about, let's talk about just in America with how mental health inequalities have really been seen all over the place, especially in our communities. It's because we have to, as you were saying, Ethiopia, we have to still interact with those who oppressed us and with those who still may consider us to be lower than humans, only three-quarters of a human being. That contributes to a lot of it. Having to work in an educational system with them, having to fellowship and be in society and interact with those who think you are less than a human, it does something to the mind. It does something to the brain.
Oh, there's a recent study came out talking about how emotional trauma it affects the brain as physical trauma affects
Yes,
the
it
brain.
does. Yes, it does.
Like, so you can have a traumatic brain injury off of emotional trauma. And this is important news because the amount of emotional distress that Black people all around this world face because of how this system is set up, where white is moral, white is good, white is intelligent, white is beautiful, and Black being the anti-white, right? Blackness exists because of whiteness. And so having to carry that load, what they call is the allostatic load, which is the wear and tear of something psychological in the physical body, having to carry that allostatic load is a really important thing to acknowledge and address.
Absolutely. I see a comment from a LinkedIn user saying that, we have to articulate our needs and demand clearly what we want. Absolutely. And then sometimes, we were talking about having to live amongst, the ancestors of those who oppressed us, having them as our boss, right? We're talking about on our jobs, in the workforce, how difficult it is to interact and be, not cordial, but just be okay, be well, knowing that people might sabotage something or might say something or might think you're inferior. You could have all the degrees that you want. You could have the top degrees. You could have 3 master's degrees. You could have a PhD, and you will still be looked down upon as inferior based on colonialism, right? It all stems back from that. And I love that you both have pointed it out. I want to really continue to talk about what inequality looks like, and then how does it really contribute to mental health. Itiyopiya, you started sharing on it. Otoa, kind of what's your take on that? How does systemic inequality contribute to mental health issues?
Like my sister really rightfully puts it, it creates a society of the first class citizen and second class citizens. It creates a society where you have superior individuals vis-a-vis inferior individuals. And this is not based on mental ability to navigate what is required either at the job place or at school or in the social arena. If you look at what we are talking about, if we were to judge, if I have to go all the ways to Martin Luther King and say that if you were to judge people based on the content of their character as well as their cognitive power, I'm telling you here right now that tables will really overturn. But what have you just said before I swung into response? People are, first of all, judging you based on the color of your skin. And the moment your color is black, your hair is kinky, and you do not have blue eyes, and you do not have the accents, already you have been stereotyped and boxed and placed where you belong. And so, however much your qualification is, however much your ability is, however much your adaptation is, you don't count. And you see what? This is really what pains people. Because in this part of the world where I'm coming from, people are never based on, judged on or evaluated on what they are able to do. And so the whole hullabaloo about, oh, I'm subjecting you to an interview, I'm subjecting you to performance contracting. The moment you appear in those boardrooms with a black skin, your goose is already lost.
Done.
You are going nowhere. You have no future. And so to me, that is where the problem starts from. Already, you are playing the second fiddle. And have you ever imagined, my sisters, when you know very well that in this territory, in this particular ecosystem, I am playing the second class citizen. And so your self-esteem has already been killed. You appear as if you are already a lame duck. You know how the lame duck behaves in the midst of those ducks that are able? It operates knowing that I must know. One singer said you must know how to. He said what? Know how to run, know how to survive, and know how to escape.
Yes.
Because that is where the problem is. We are not competing on the question of what we can be able to do. We already come to the table in the pretext that we are not. And you see what? It really pains me because somebody can just render you persona non grata based on competence. They like using terms such as competence versus incompetence.
Yeah.
And when you do your scrutiny and you realize that this person is so competent, but his or her incompetence has emanated solely because of the skin color, then it leaves you very, very desperate. Like my sister Itiyopiya puts it, the white color exists because there is a background called black.
Yes.
That contrast must be recognized. And so let us try to look at what it is that can create equal opportunities and equal survival for all, whether you're coming from the east or the west, whether you are tall or short, whether you are black or white. It's all about, what I say is that this amalgamation is what creates the healthy work environment, healthy social environment. As a teacher, I am so amazed when I see the pluralism in our schools now. We have deliberately formed what we call inclusion department,
Mm.
and in that we aim at treating all children from the east and the west and the north and the south as equal, with their godly ingrained power and ingenuity. What they bring on the table is what we look for. We don't look at how they look like, the color of their skin, the configuration of their nose. It doesn't really add value to us as teachers. And so the question that inequality contributes to mental health issues is quite perfect. This has, and I speak from the ecosystem where I'm coming from. If you take a school system, for example, and a black student feels that he or she has been boxed, has been relegated, it becomes the whole genesis of the problem that will bedevil that particular student all the way. No amount of counseling, no amount of psychosocial support will. I have, and I'm telling you, my sisters, this is on a very, I have witnessed a suicidal case from one student who was bullied based on his color. I don't want to disclose whether it was white or black.
Sure.
And it was very unfortunate that the student went ahead to terminate his life. As we talk, he's almost 2 years down the line. We buried him. And what he came to me as a last resort and said, I want to speak to you because I think you are very candid, you are very open on these questions. I am only 12 years of age, but I'm telling you, I cannot hold this any further.
Mm.
I thought it was, I tried all possible or humanly possible mechanism to correct the situation, but ultimately that is how tragic it ended. All the people of this universe must awaken to the reality that more than 400 years down the line, whether you're talking of an established democracy like the USA, or even 60 years or so in most of the African nations, we must awaken to the reality and say, enough is enough. We have lost so many people. If they are not physically dead, they are emotionally dead.
Yes.
They are socially dead. They are psychologically dead. For
Yeah.
how long shall we be responsible for these heinous acts and we behave like nothing is happening? The other day, and really, this really touched me so much, that there was somebody seated in a corner of the world saying that now is the time to depopulate the world. He was saying that the world is overpopulated, and he was actually putting the statistics at slightly over 9 billion people is too much for the world to be sustainable. They're coming up with very bogus terms such as sustainability. They're coming up with things such as human control vis-a-vis climate warming and carbon dating, all those. So this individual is saying we need to reduce at least 3 million people on the surface of the earth so that 4 million will be much more sustainable. And the question was where are you going to start from? And you know what the individual said? We are going to start from Africa because Africa has the largest population of people languishing in abject poverty. Africa has the largest people with high levels of illiteracy. Africa, because Africa adds no value to the global stage. It is a revelation that some of you might sit back and say, oh, Otoa, do you think it is right. But to me, when I come across such, and you see, most of our African nations and leadership are actually contributing to this
Sure, sure. And
because they do not have the proactive ways, they do not have the pragmatic ways to put people at first. The moment we stop putting humanity at first, what Mahatma Gandhi said, humanity first, and we put business first, self ecocentrism first,
yes,
capitalism first, and all these shenanigans first, that is where the rain started beating us.
I,
And
I,
I'm telling you,
yes,
the number of people, statistics indicate very clearly the number of global mental health issues will always be on the rise.
yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it really speaks to the conditioning process that has happened now. Where African kings and chiefs and those who are prime ministers and leading countries are believing this rhetoric because of conditioning and because maybe something has been offered. And right, humanity is now taking a backseat. And we're talking about sustainability. I mean, I'm sure that they're thinking about, who's expendable. I mean, we've always been the most expendable. We're not even human, according to certain people, so that's how it really, really plays out. I mean, you shared so much. It's kind of mind blowing because I want to also recognize that it can be triggering for some who even listening to this now and may listen to it later, right? And so we acknowledge that what we're speaking about, some of the systemic inequalities that we're speaking about, having to talk about it can be re-traumatizing, right? You're living in it consistently there. So we want to take a moment, take a breath and acknowledge that, right? Because a lot of heavy stuff has been shared. And unfortunately, it seems like there's no end in sight. I could see if we had a system kind of in place to move some things along and make certain things okay, it seems like these things are just going to continue on. And we're talking about reparations, we're talking about it here, we're talking about it globally, but a lot of it has just been talk, but there are some countries and there are some places, that are really having those talks and those connections and those conversations about reparations. But I want to save how do we kind of start to repair this into the end, right? So we've talked about what systemic inequalities look like. I want to talk about why it's important. Now I want to kind of shift. Why is equality important in mental health? Why is this something that we really need to focus on? And I'll say this before I let you speak, Ethiopia. Otoa, I appreciate you for not sharing the race of the young man who unfortunately, ended their life. Because yes, we are, I believe, yes, we in the African diaspora face systemic inequalities the most, but a lot of people face it. I'm not trying to generalize. We're talking about, Black mental health issues, right? We want to make sure we're talking about that. But I appreciate you for not disclosing that because our minds could even shift to a different way. And so just to make the main thing, this happens all the time. So I'm a school counselor in a high school for ninth through 12th graders, and the things that I see and hear about are disheartening, based on what our children have to deal with. So, Ethiopia, let's shift to why is equality important in mental health? Why is it so imperative that we have it, for everyone's mental health?
So, I mean, given what we've already discussed, and knowing that how society is set up contributes to mental unwellness, the injustice that we face day to day contributes to injustice, to mental unwellness, which then is physical unwellness, right? Because the mind and the body, they're interconnected. The mind is saying one thing, the body responds, the body says something, the mind responds. So it's this interplay. Unlike what we were taught by Cartesian philosophy, it's not a dichotomy, it's a unit, right? And so if we are facing systematic injustice and it creates and it exacerbates a prevalence of mental unwellness, then there has to be justice in mental health. There must be a way for everyone to tap into their own potential to heal. Right. And so like with the work that I do, it's like my thing is like, all right, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pain because there's a lot of trauma. And we don't have Black folks don't have many avenues to turn to have a container held for the healing of that. So we persevere, we get through, we're resilient, we're strong. It takes a toll on us mentally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Yes.
So there's this study that was talking about the allostatic load of perceived racism, racial discrimination. Just the perception of racial discrimination can create an allostatic load, a taxing on the body, a wear and tear on the body that presents itself as heart disease, diabetes, cancer. Here's the thing, for me, this is an important question, and we know that there is just straight up, there's systematic injustice in the medical world, in the institution of medicine. Black folks have the worst in the United States. Black mothers have the worst outcomes of anyone else.
Yeah.
Black maternal health is it's so low. The amount of Black mothers that die, Black babies that die, it's ridiculous in contrast to their white counterparts.
Yeah.
Right? And so when we're talking about having equity in mental health, it's to create an environment where we all can thrive. The question is, we already know that the system is set up that it doesn't want everybody to thrive. What can we do as Black people? What can we do? And even beyond, because we've articulated our needs clearly for forever. Like, I'm not talking about 1950. Yo, like, I learned that even on the ships that brought enslaved people from the continent of Africa to the Caribbean, to Central and South America, and to what is now known as the United States, they ended up like creating protections on the ship so people couldn't jump off.
Yeah.
So that you had to stay here in it. You had to stay in the mess. You had to suffer. So that is the foundation of what we exist in now. Like, how do we find our resources to step into prioritizing our own mental wellness? Because I don't trust that anybody else is going to do that for us.
That's really good. And I think sometimes we depend on the ones who hurt us to also give us the remedy. But I love where you're going with that. It's not going to happen, right? Because the systems have been set in place without us in mind. And so our mental wellness is not even taken into consideration. And so we as a community, and I think we have to get back to being the nation again, to being the community, to being the village again, which is it's how our ancestors operated, especially us, right, in the United States. Sometimes we can be so insular, so singular, and we don't connect. We have to support each other in that and to make sure that we're all okay, because it's not coming from anyone else, because no one else is caring about our well-being in the way that we will. And so I love that you pointed that out.
Steph, if I could just say just one more thing.
Please do.
So for me, because even in my own life, I've found like sometimes I don't have the capacity, I don't have the resource to be in community.
Yeah.
Right? Because things are so heavy sometimes.
Yeah.
There's so much that we're dealing with collectively and individually. But like you did earlier, you said, hey, we're talking about something really heavy here. Let's just pause right here to acknowledge something. It's that pause for us.
Yes.
It's that reconnection to ourselves.
Yes.
Right. And in those ways, like for me, I try to find the easiest things that I can do for that. I won't go into all of that because that, that's like coming into solutions and things like that. But I also want to say that it really starts with us reconnecting with ourselves first. That's the easiest.
I love
Thank
that.
you.
I love that.
Stephanie, can I jump on?
Oh, jump right on in, jump right on.
Yeah. And I get the passion from my sister. It really resonates so well with some of us who are struggling to demystify these inequalities. And it really pains me a lot that this time and age, somebody is still hell-bent to ensure that these disparities are still existing.
Yeah.
Many years down the line, Martin Luther King sang about it. He got assassinated. He's now resting somewhere. Many years, the so-called the subjection of the black Negroes, all these have been documented in historical books. My sister has talked about what colonialism has done, what racism has done, what apartheid did, but even with rich history and literature, nobody or somebody somewhere never comes to say, why must I learn from the mistakes that were done by my foreparents? You know, they say it's only a fool who keeps on repeating the yesteryear's methodology to
Right.
gain new outcomes. You reach at a time and say, no, man, this is not working. When we hear stories such as Black Lives Matter movements in America, we are left perturbed that at this time and age, somebody thinks that a certain community, by virtue of their DNA, should not enjoy the privileges that other humanity. Because when we talk of mental health, Stephanie, and my sister Ethiopia, it is a basic human right.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you depart from that, you are subjecting lots and lots of population to mental health anguish. People are going to be subjected to untold forms of human suffering in their homes, in the institutions. But because you have created an architecture of a society that perpetuates this, then there's no survival for the vulnerable people that we are talking about. People will continue being desperate. People will continue being um, um, subjected to all forms of emotional turbulence. And I don't know, maybe someday we need to carry out a scientific study into what goes on in the mind of a what? A villain. To me, I call them villains because they are subjecting people to much more untold misery.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think to them, they celebrate so much when they see Stephanie, they see X, they see Y very low. And that's not a person. That is more than a witch from this end. When my happiness comes as a result of another person's detrimental position, then who am I? Who am I basically? Because when God created us here on earth, regardless of our religion, he had only one primary duty, that we may make the world a better place for everybody. And so these inequalities, to me, they really have had a lot of untold mental health status. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people have come to a point and said, no, enough is enough. Yeah. We cannot continue operating in this state when we are subjected in this form. Look at the economics. When you are hired in an organization, and I think this is a global phenomenon, the color of your skin, your disposition already is your bargaining power. You cannot earn more than somebody with an alternative skin color. Ironically, you could even be more qualified than the other person. In this set of questions, You gave us an opportunity to look at this report by Tuskegee. I don't know if I pronounced it well. If you read that report, Stephanie, you will really, really just be crying that in the United States, a sample population of men can be isolated, denied their human rights, because when you deny somebody access to medical health provision, you are simply taking away that person's human rights. If you read that report, which I'm sure you have read, the fact that a number of men suffering from this terrible disease were isolated, and because the objectivity of that particular study was to get an outcome, what happens if a certain population of people are not or are denied access to medical provision? That is not the question that you can even think of, that you are playing gainful on a certain population.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, some of us from this end, either socially, economically, or geographically, we have played as guinea pigs.
absolutely.
The experimentation processes anywhere, even up to now, that was in the 1930s and 1940s. But we're talking about the present times. When they want to do an experimental process of the world, and they sit in their boardrooms, which I doubt is fully represented. And the question is, where do we start from? They know where they can get cheap, available, vulnerable guinea pigs to start from.
Absolutely.
Very, very, very unfortunate.
It is. My sister went to Tuskegee, and I just was down there for their homecoming, and that space where they experimented, they did the Tuskegee experiment to test for syphilis and all that. It's still there, and it still haunts the campus. No one will touch it. It has been left abandoned because when they finally realized they were, infringing on human rights, right, and they stopped all that, they left it. And so all of the experimentation tools and materials are still sitting right there. Everything is there, like just a reminder of what's going on. It's dusty, it's right there, and it's still on the campus, and it's still a painful part of our history. And it really contributed to why a lot of people didn't even want to take the vaccine for the pandemic. And I'm shifting right back, because we know that if you want to test something on a population, as you said, Otoa, we are always the one used. And I appreciate you saying that, because a lot of people are still thinking of that. I think even what you were saying, Ethiopia, in the medical field, we're seen as strong and resilient, but now our resilience has been weaponized against us, because you're so strong, you don't even need anesthesia. You don't even need any medicine. You don't need any painkillers, because you're just strong. Now it's a weapon. It's a sledgehammer used to crash even us.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've started saying I am resilient, but I don't want to be so strong that you don't think I need help, or you don't want to check on me. Check on your strong friends. Don't consider someone so strong that they can just handle everything. We as a people, we are strong, but we are still human. Our strength doesn't make us inhuman. We are not guinea pigs to be used and then discarded. They've used our cells, they've used our blood, they used our bodies to test this and test that. It's hard to think of that. It's hard to even exist and live in a society where we know that still continues to go on. And yes, the Tuskegee experiment was out in the open. I know they're still doing certain things like that. How does that make us feel, knowing that at any point in time, someone that we know and love who is in a desperate situation, you give someone a certain amount of money, or you say, I'll give you this, and they're in a hard time. They're going to take it, not even knowing what they're agreeing to. I want to say this really quick. We are wrapping up. Believe it or not, we've been already speaking for about an hour. I want to touch on two things really quick, right? One, how did the pandemic reveal the impact of systemic inequalities? I want to share about that. I kind of started drifting into that. Then I want to start talking about some of those, re-talking and continue to talk about some of those practical things that we can encourage people to do who are dealing with mental health issues from systemic inequalities. So how did the pandemic reveal? And it was a global pandemic. It didn't just happen in America. It didn't just happen in Kenya. It happened everywhere. We were all affected. How did it shine a light, and how did it kind of spotlight some of those systemic inequalities that were having a major impact on our mental health issues?
I'll just jump in and just
Please.
say, like, again, it with the pandemic, we were able to see that Black people had less access to
Mm-hmm.
medical health care
Yeah.
because Black folks in the United States have less access to health care. Period. So if less access to health care, overpopulated hospitals and emergency rooms and urgent cares, coupled with a systematic or a system of injustice through racial bias, that's what we saw. That's how come we saw such high numbers in the Black community as well with death. And it affected my home. My partner died from
Oh,
COVID.
wow. Right, having to deal with that, having to deal with the loss. You
Sorry,
can't get to the
sorry, sorry.
hospital. So sorry
Thank
to
you.
hear that. Seriously. Um, want to take a moment to pause there too, right? For those who are still even dealing
Yeah.
with the effects of the pandemic, and they said it's over, but we know that it's going to continue on. It affected our entire lives. It shifted our lives.
You know what? You know what, Stephanie?
Mm,
To me, I think the whole Olabalu around the pandemic was much more about commercialization process.
yes.
Because in this part of the continent, and I'm very careful in my selection of words.
Mm,
The moment you demarcate the world as the global north and the global south, then you are getting it wrong.
yeah.
We were never allowed in the first place to manufacture our own vaccines.
Yeah.
That you know very well. The question was why? And when Africans or African continents led by African presidents pushed the card and said, we are ready, we have what it takes, we have what the mechanism, and South Africa was the first country that was raring to go. All of a sudden, COVID came to an end. The World Health Organization stood up and said, you know what, folks? COVID is no longer a life-threatening condition. So people can pull off the masks and resume their early life. The way the pandemic abruptly came to a normalcy was quite suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the pandemic, for example, it opens up a lot of questions that you, even as a layman or lay person seated somewhere, you will say that this was a whole hogwash. Yeah. The fact that even in addressing the crisis globally was based on which area, which people, which facilities, which funding. It exposed us very badly that some lives mattered, others didn't matter. Yeah. So when people died in numbers, we all became statistics. And it's very, very sad
Right.
that when people become just but statistics, to me, I think that is the most terrible thing.
Horrible.
But the question is, why did this pandemic receive the kind of treatment from those organizations that we really thought? And here I single the World Health Organization because that's a global community that should be concerned by every living person on the surface of the earth, whether poor, rich, advantaged, disadvantaged, black or white,
Yeah.
north or south. But we saw a lot of glaring disparities in the way the COVID was conducted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, people really died. People suffered. And when you look at the numbers, and people will be saying, oh, some people or population died because of their irresponsibility. Some were not cautious. But it all spills down to what my sister Ethiopia has said. When you are faced with a health crisis, the first thing that comes in is the support, financial support
Yes.
that comes with it. Are we providing medical facility? Are we providing medical care? And the question is, all over the world, this is on a very unbalanced state. Even the question of what we are discussing about mental health, if you come to this part of the continent, you can walk for many miles before you come to a mental facility.
Yes.
They are not there, and if they are there, they are more than just camps that really just assembles men and women. It's like you're going there to just receive an anesthesia, some painkiller, and you do all you. It is not well equipped. But what happens in other jurisdictions? Very well resourced.
Yeah. Funded.
Attention is given, fully
Absolutely.
funded.
Fully
And so
funded.
the question of funding is a key one. Because when you talk of these global communities, global institutions, World Health Organization, IMF, World Bank, they have a duty and a responsibility, whether you're talking of a very poor boy in Lesotho or in Gambia or in somewhere in Nigeria, that person is similar to a small boy or girl somewhere in the city of London or anywhere else. We must look at all human race with the same lenses that we look at them, and really create that um, result, resolution that every life matters.
Every life matters. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. I love that. I really want to thank you both for being here. We are wrapping up and we are finished. I just want to hear just a few practical things that someone can do, really mental health based, right? We know that countries have the responsibility to provide financial reparations. I do believe that will come to pass. I do believe we will see that day where states and countries are going to, begin to just make certain things happen, right? We are finishing up. What is one practical thing that someone can do who's experiencing mental health issues based on systemic inequalities?
I'm just gonna say, like, as I was saying before, like how it starts with the individual. I'll give
Yeah,
just a really quick metaphor. When you're on the plane, they tell you, like, before you can help anybody else, you put your mask on,
yeah,
right? If I feel like I could just be out here in community helping everybody and I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not doing anybody any good.
that's right.
So in taking care of ourselves, I believe it starts with the breath. This is stuff that's ancient. Taking that moment of pause, being able to feel, to sense in, to not be so reactive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And listen to the wisdom that our own bodies has for us.
Yeah.
And that's a practice. That's meditation. That's a 5 minute meditation. That's a 8 count breath.
Mm-hmm.
It can be as simple as that, and the intention around that. Set that intention and move forward with that intention. That's what
I
I got
love,
to say.
I love that. I love that. Otoa.
Yeah, I think for us, Stephanie, we need, first of all, to really accept who we are.
Yeah.
Accept that this is the quagmire that we are in.
Mm.
This is the predicament that we are in. And all this starts with acceptance. The fact that I am in here, I'm in this hall. How do I come out of it?
Mm.
So I want to urge everybody struggling with this condition, first of all, to accept the fact that nobody might be coming to rescue you. 100% of the effort must come with yourself. So
Yes.
I really want to urge people to practice what we call self-care. Self-care. The fact that you have your own to take care of yourself. please do not, it's like exacerbating the situation. The environment is cruel, the government is cruel, the society is cruel, everything has become very cruel. And so you have yourself to pick up your pieces and say, you know what, I'm not going to, because if we all just decide and say there is a future even with these states, I'm telling you, my sisters, we can navigate out of this horrible situation. I do say that yesterday is gone. We have only today to deal with and tomorrow to look forward to. So
Yes.
let us pick our pieces, lick our wounds, know that socially, economically, politically, we are not doing so well. And just really, like I started by saying, GRIT, greatness requires internal toughness. Build in yourself a very resilient shock absorbers that will help you propel into the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Again, thank you, Ethiopia. Thank you, Otoa. This has been an awesome conversation. Hope you both have a great rest of your day. And thank you to everyone who watched today and who will watch in the future. Remember to take your moment, take your breath, practice great self care. This is the world that we're living in, but we don't have to suffer in it. Let's get community and let's know ourselves. Let's make sure we're taking time. We're not just rushing through things, and let ourselves feel our feelings. Until next time, you have been watching Black Mental Health Matters. We hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have an awesome day wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in.